Hey, I'm Jesse. Let's have a devotion. We're going to look at Revelation 20, verses 4 through 6. Here's the text. Then I saw thrones and people seated on them who were given authority to judge. I also saw the souls of those who had been beheaded because of their testimony about Jesus and because of the word of God, who had not worshipped the beast or his image, and who had not accepted the mark on their foreheads or their hands. They came to life and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. The rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were completed. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is the one who shares in the first resurrection. The second death has no power over them, but they will be priests of God and of Christ, and they will reign with him for 1,000 years. I know that there's debate around this, and I don't understand why there is. I believe that 1,000 years means 1,000 years. And no, that doesn't necessarily make me a dispensationalist. It just makes me a biblical literalist. Just believe that it literally means this. The postmillennialist or like amillennialist view, even though Revelation 20 contains the word 1,000 years 6 times, doesn't believe that it's literally 1,000 years. And I just find that difficult when asked the question, how long is the 1,000 years, to answer, we don't know. And then to interface that with teaching that 1,000 years is like a day to the Lord makes it even more confusing, because it means that all this happens in a single day. And I just think that the historical grammatical hermeneutic of the text says that it's 1,000 years, and it says that 6 times. So I believe that this is after the Battle of Armageddon, where the Antichrist, the beast, and his false prophet, those two are thrown into this lake of sulfur, lake of fire that burns with sulfur. And then I think that Jesus, having returned in Revelation 19, there can be no doubt about it, that is ungainsayably the return of Jesus Christ. He's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Who else would bear that name written on his thigh, written on his robe? Who else is called the Word of God? Who else is called faithful and true? No one but Jesus. He's the one who says, behold, I come like a thief. That's Jesus. So clearly, obviously, Jesus returning in Revelation 19. And then what comes next is the 1,000-year reign. Spoiler, the very next verse, actually, I think it's verse 7, is like when the 1,000 years are completed, the devil will be released from his prison for a short time. But this is, I believe, a literal 1,000-year reign. There's another view that says this is actually the description of the current state of things. Okay, the post-millennialist view, and I love some post-millennialist pastors, man. There are guys that I've flown somewhere to sit down and talk with post-millennialist pastors because I respect them and I love them. But I care way more what the text says than what they say. When the two differ, I got to side with the text. So here are people who have been beheaded because of their testimony about Jesus. No one, there were like 1 million Christians that all fled before the sacking of Jerusalem in AD 70. Jesus' words were clear that like not one generation will pass away until this comes to pass. And so there are people who took his warnings literally, and they fled, and they survived as a result. If they were on the rooftop, they didn't come down. Like they just They just went straight to the street and left, got out of Jerusalem as fast as they could. And so the literal application of that in AD 70 saved lives. And then literally not one stone was left unturned on the temple. In fact, one of those stones is on display at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. I've been there. I put my hand on it. It's all true. It all happened literally. But where are the people who were beheaded by Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian? And why aren't they alive right now? And when was the mark of the beast on people's foreheads and hands? When was that? Because these are guys who didn't participate in that, and they came out of it. They came to life. So where are the resurrected, decapitated martyrs that are supposed to be reigning right now? And if they're not reigning on the earth, if they're reigning in heaven, why does it say that they came to life? And why does it say the rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were completed? Why is it called a resurrection then? So the 1,000-year reign of Christ, I believe, is a 1,000-year reign of Christ. And I believe that the martyrs who endured and who didn't chug the global satanic cult Kool-Aid, who willingly didn't take the mark of the beast on their foreheads or their hands, meaning the number of his name is 666, and you can't participate in the economy unless you bear that name. It's a permanent mark, and you're not saved if you take it. These guys didn't take it, and as a result, they likely lost everything. I mean, if you're not allowed to participate in the economy, who's going to accept your mortgage payment? What's going to happen to your house, your savings, your 401k, your Roth IRA? They gave up everything. To people who gave in, it seemed like a no-brainer. But to these Christians, it was actually a no-brainer. No, I'm not going to bow down and worship the inventor of pedophilia. I don't care how many signs and wonders he performs. I don't believe him. I believe God. I believe his word. So they didn't accept that. And so they're cast out. And then they get their heads cut off. Congrats. All right, if you do that in the era of the Great Tribulation and then and the Battle of Armageddon, if you willingly lose everything for the gospel, hold fast to your testimony about Jesus, hold steadfastly to the word of God, guess what you get? Same thing John the Baptist got. Your head cut off. And that's what happened to these. But they're brought back to life. This is the ultimate comeback. They came to life. And this is the first resurrection. They are called blessed and holy because they share in the first resurrection. The second death, that's hell forever. That's the lake of fire that burns with sulfur, has no power over them. But instead, they are priests of God and of Christ, and they reign with him for 1,000 years. So I believe that these resurrected martyrs are reigning with Christ in the temple that's described in Ezekiel, the closing chapters of Ezekiel. That's the only way the closing chapters of Ezekiel make sense to me, is if they're literal. I mean, like those things, the specs are down to the inch on like the blueprint for how this thing is to be built. It's so specific. And I think it's the facility for where this happens. That's why also why its dimensions are far bigger than the dimensions of Solomon's temple. So here's what I want to take away from this today. I think that in light of this and these incredible testimonies, these incredible saints who refused to bend the knee, they defied like what seemed like the whole world. They didn't worship the beast, didn't bow down to his idol. They didn't take the mark. And now they're back and they're reigning. They're serving as priests of God and Christ, and they reign with him for 1,000 years. This makes me want to endure everything, anything. Endure anything, Christian. Look at the blessed and holy ones who share in the first resurrection. Look at how God talks about them in his word. And consider what an honor it is to face real persecution for your faith. I think that getting your head cut off is about the worst case scenario. Can you imagine how things will go when people know that you love Jesus and you hold fast to the word of God? But the worst case scenario is that you're going to get your head cut off. And that's what happens to these. But they come back. They are blessed. They're made holy. They are priests of God, and they reign with Jesus for a millennium. That's amazing. So, wow. Like, they didn't bend the knee, even when the economy was going to kick them out if they didn't. Even when it cost them their heads. I think that there are Christians in Seattle that need to toughen up and be willing to suffer way more the awkward social encounters. Be willing to be shot down, to be held back professionally. Okay? Like that. That's a case I've even heard made by elders at churches here. That I don't want to be known as an elder at this church because it's going to cost me professionally. You're supposed to be an elder of the church, man, and you're ashamed of the name of Christ. And you're trying to be covert ops at your place of work rather than alight the gospel. Like look at the saints that come out of the millennium, who reign with Christ for the millennium. It cost them their heads. And now they're reigning with Christ. They're priests for him for 1,000 years. They reign with him for 1,000 years. They are outcast and they are murdered for refusing to bend the knee, refusing to stop talking about Jesus, refusing to give up their adherence to the Bible, the Word of God. And it cost them their lives. It cost them their heads. It costs us nothing compared to that. It costs us nothing remotely close to that. We Seattle Christians need to buck up. No one is going to cut a Christian's head off in Seattle for holding to the word of God. Buck up. You want to be a priest of God? Do you want to reign with Christ for 1,000 years? Do you want to be counted as blessed, described in a ministry that is, and be in a ministry that's described as holy? Buck up and be willing to suffer more, because there are too many Christians that aren't willing to put up with an awkward moment, a demotion, a censure from HR, a course training and how to be more open-minded to different worldviews and educated on the virtues of jihadism and Islam or something like that. You're not even willing to go through that, much less get a finger cut off, much less get your head cut off. And no one's going to do any of that to you in Seattle right now. Like, none of that's going to happen to you. We need to buck up. We need to be more willing to face rejection. We need to be more forthright with the gospel of Jesus Christ, no matter what it costs us, because it won't cost us a fraction what it's going to cost them. Christians, let's buck up. Let's be bold. It's going to cost the tribulation saints their heads. What is it going to cost you? Nothing by comparison.